Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fish Keeping. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 7 of the best 10-gallon tank stocking options. So here in Australia, obviously we use litres, so the equivalent of a 10-gallon tank would be around 40 litres. Or if you want to be exact, I believe it's around 37.8541 litres. So obviously this video is going to be aimed at the people who have an aquarium that is around the 10-gallon capacity. So all 7 of these fish are peaceful, easy to keep, and can obviously live in a tank that is around 10 gallons. But without any further ado, let's just jump straight into today's video with the first fish on our list. So as for the first species of fish today, we have a super cool little catfish. We have Corydoras Catfish. So one of the great things about Corys is obviously they are super peaceful, super tolerant to all sorts of water chemistries, and they are super easy to care for. So there is actually around 170 species of known Corydoras out there, so there's heaps of different varieties you can get for your aquarium. So a really cool thing about these Corydoras, which makes them super adaptable to any sort of aquarium, is that they do actually have a labyrinth organ. So you may notice if you keep these guys that they dart up to the surface really quick and come back down, and what they are actually doing is grabbing oxygen from the surface of the water. And another super cool thing is that these guys have modified scales which are sort of bony, and they are in armor plating. And when these guys actually die, you can actually keep the little armor plating. It's pretty cool. But enough of all that. As for the water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a pH of around 5.5 to 7. And you're going to want a temperature anywhere between 22 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is around 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So like I said before, these fish are super tolerant of all sorts of water chemistries, and as long as you have relatively tropical water parameters, they should do fine. So as for diet for these guys, you want to vary their diet quite a bit. So you can feed them sinking pellets, so there's all sorts of sinking Cory pellets and stuff like that. You can also go ahead and feed them frozen foods, because those will sink down to the bottom and they will be able to eat those, and you can feed them some live foods like blackworms. Now, as for tank setting for these guys, you're going to want to make sure there's plenty of swim space around the bottom of your aquarium. Obviously, being a bottom-dwelling fish, they tend to stay around the bottom, so you're going to want plenty of space for them to swim around in there. And it's always beneficial to keep them on either bare bottom or soft substrate, just to minimize the risk of them cutting their barbels, which are obviously their little whisker things. And then as for tank mates for these guys, they are so peaceful. So any sort of tetras, barbs, live bearers, bristlenose, anything like that that's not going to pick at them too much is generally a perfect tank mate for them. So yeah, the Corydoras Catfish is definitely a great stocking option for a 10-gallon aquarium. As for the next fish on our list, we have a super cool little American cichlid. We have Apistogrammas. So much like the Corydoras Catfish, there is heaps of different species of them. So currently there's actually 93 recognized species of Apistogramma. Obviously you can't get all 93 here in Australia, but you definitely can get quite a wide variety. Another great thing about these is that they can be kept in pairs in your aquarium, and they are super peaceful if you keep them in a pair, so they're not going to bully each other or stuff like that. And another plus with the Apistogrammas is that they actually have a relatively large life expectancy. So if you do take good care of these guys, they can live from anywhere between 5 to 10 years. So as for water parameters, your pH should be around 5.5 to 6.8, and you should have a temperature of around 27 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is around 80 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So these guys definitely like that acidic water and the higher temperatures in order to thrive. As for diet, you can get away with feeding them all sorts of dry foods, frozen foods, live foods. It doesn't really matter, as long as they are eating a nutrient-rich, varied diet. And then as for tank setting, you can throw in all sorts of caves or pots or things like that where they can actually, nest. And it's obviously also great to throw in things like plants just to make them feel a lot safer in that aquarium. So as for tank mates, you do need to remember they are a bottom dwelling fish, so you don't want anything too aggressive that's going to nip at them too much. So things like tetras, barbs, bristlenose, and Corydoras Catfish all make great tank mates for them. They are super peaceful, but they are a micro predator, so you don't want to be keeping them with things like cherry shrimp or small rice borers or little gobies or things like that. But yeah, the Apistogramma is another great 10-gallon stocking option, and I would highly recommend them. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have a super cool little top-dwelling fish. We have Medaka. So some great things about Medaka is that they're super cold tolerant. So here in Australia, they can be kept outdoors all year round, but obviously you have a 10-gallon aquarium, so they'll do fine in that as well. But basically what I'm saying is they definitely don't need a heater whatsoever. Some other great things about them is that they come in a variety of colors or strains. They're super easy to breed and they are also very peaceful. So as for water parameters for these guys, like I said before, they are super cold tolerant, so you can keep them at a temperature between 18 to 24 degrees Celsius, which is around 64 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And then as for pH, anywhere between 7 to 8 should do. And then onto diet for these guys, they are a top dwelling fish, so floating foods or floating flakes, things like that are great, as well as live foods like baby brine shrimp and live mosquito larvae, and you can also get away with feeding them a variety of different frozen foods. And then as for tank setting, they do like a lot of swim space, but they do also like a few plants in there to hide in. So floating plants are a great one. Obviously things like Amazon frogwit, redroot floaters, those sorts of floating plants with the big root structures are the best. You're also going to want to keep them in low flow aquariums, so a sponge filter is perfectly fine. You just don't want anything pushing them around the aquarium too much. They are very fragile and they aren't the best swimmers. And you're going to want a lid because obviously being at the top of your aquarium, if they get spooked, they can quite easily jump out, and that's definitely, you don't want that. And then as for tank mates, you're going to want to keep them with super duper peaceful fish. So things like tetras, rasboras, bristlenose, Corydoras catfish, and even live bearers should do. But with that being said, the Medaka is another great fish to put into your 10-gallon aquarium. Moving on to the next group of fish on our list, we have barbs. So to me, barbs are a super cool and interesting fish. So they actually come from the Cyprinidae family, and a lot of other common fish that come from the Cyprinidae family are things like your normal Danios, koi fish, goldfish, and like common carp and stuff like that. So they are actually related to a bunch of different aquarium fish. Another really cool thing about these guys is they come in a variety of colors and sizes, which makes them a perfect addition into any sized aquarium. So as for water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a pH of around 6 to 8, and you're going to want a temperature anywhere between 20 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is around that 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. And then as for diet, they aren't fussy whatsoever, so dry foods, frozen foods, and live foods all make a great diet for them. And then as for tank setting, you're going to want plenty of swim space. So they are a relatively big bodied fish and they do like to swim around your aquarium quite frequently. So you don't want to clutter it up too much with like wood, rocks, and plants. And then as for tank mates, they can go with larger sized tetras, Corydoras catfish, bristlenose, and even some live bearers. So there are a few barb species that are a little bit nippy, so things like tiger barbs, for example. You don't want to keep them with fish with long flowing fins like guppies, just because they will nip at their fins a lot. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have another super cool little catfish. We have Otocinclus. So the super cool thing about these guys that sets them apart from the Corydoras is that these guys actually have a sucking mouth and they will actually eat a lot of algae throughout your aquarium. And another super cool thing about them is that there's actually 22 different species of Otocinclus, and a lot of the time they're just sold as like just Otocinclus in the aquarium stores, but you could get a variety of different species. You can obviously tell the difference if you know what you're looking for, but for the most part, they do look very similar. So as for water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a pH of around 6 to 7.5, and you're going to want a temperature anywhere between 21 to 26 degrees Celsius, which is around that 71 to 79 degrees Fahrenheit. So you're going to want to feed these guys a pretty varied diet. So you can feed these guys a variety of different things. Obviously, your sinking pellets, your sinking frozen foods, and sinking live foods. But you can also throw in some zucchini every now and then, and you can throw in some algae wafers just for them to get like a little bit of spirulina. And then as for the tank setting, you're going to want to keep these guys in. You should keep them in a relatively planted aquarium, so they are quite skittish, and the plants do like help them feel safe. As for tank mates, you can keep them with barbs, tetras, minnows, live bearers, Corydoras catfish, and bristlenose. There's a variety of different things you can keep them with. They are super peaceful and they won't hurt anything whatsoever. But yeah, with that being said, the Otocinclus catfish is another great fish that can go into your 10-gallon tank. So moving on to the next fish on our list, we have another super cool South American cichlid. We have the Bolivian Butterfly Ram. So these guys are a super cool, colorful, peaceful alternative to a German blue ram. So they do look actually like completely different to German blue rams, but they are obviously related. But besides that, they are super peaceful and you can actually sort of treat them like a crebensis. So you could just throw one into your community aquarium and it would be fine in there. They don't need a partner whatsoever, but you can also spice it up a bit and throw a partner in there if you want to, and they should hopefully cooperate. So as for water parameters for these guys, you're going to want a pH of around 6.5 to 7.5 and a temperature anywhere between 25 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is around 77 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So much like the Apistogrammas, the diet for these guys should consist of live foods, frozen foods, and dry foods. You do want to mix up their diet every now and then, but those three should be staples. And then as for tank setting, again, much like the Apistos, coconut caves and terracotta pots are another great thing to throw in there. As for tank mates, tetras, barbs, bristlenose, and Corydoras Catfish all make great tank mates. Obviously, there's hundreds of other things you can keep them with, but those are just four things off the top of my head. But yeah, the Bolivian Ram or the Bolivian Butterfly Ram is another great fish that you can add into your 10-gallon aquarium. Moving on to the final fish on our list, we have a super cool little fish. We have Danios. So Danios are another like really cool little fish, and the cool thing about these guys is they're actually tested on a lot, but because of that they've been in a bunch of experiments, and a few really interesting things about them is that they are actually one of the very few fish that have been sent to space. So there's only been obviously a few species of fish sent to space, and I believe Danios and Medaka were two of them. I don't know about the rest, but I just think that's actually really cool. So there's obviously a bunch of other cool things. I was reading like a document about it before. I'll pop that up on the screen now. It's got like a bunch of I think it's like 10 facts about Danios. But another super cool thing that stood out to me was that they can actually heal their heart if it's been like injured or whatever. But yeah, enough of that. As for the water parameters for these guys, they are super hardy and can tolerate all sorts of water parameters. But for the most part, you're gonna want a pH of around 7 to 8. And a temperature of around 18 to 28 degrees Celsius, which is around 64 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. As for diet, much like the barbs, they are not fussy whatsoever, so you can feed them dry foods, live foods, frozen foods, and pretty much anything else you throw in their tank they will eat. Again, with tank space, they are an open water swimmer, and you might actually be able to see behind me here. I mean, these guys aren't really that active at the moment, but usually they are. They do like to swim around a lot, and you don't want to clutter their aquarium, even though this aquarium is pretty cluttered. And then as for tank mates for these guys, they can be a little bit nippy, although if you get the long fin variants like these ones, the long fin variants aren't as nippy, so you can keep them with a wider variety of things. But as for the normal, just Danios, things like barbs, tetras, Corydoras Catfish, bristlenose, and some live bearers are great tank mates for them. But yeah, Danios are another great fish that you can add into a 10-gallon aquarium, and they've also been to space, which is pretty cool. But that is going to bring us to the end of today's video, so I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope I helped you guys find a brand new fish for your 10-gallon or 37.8541 litre tank. If you did enjoy today's video and you haven't done so already, please make sure to go down and subscribe. While you're down there, smash the like button and comment your thoughts on today's video. I always love going down there and reading them all, and I reply back to every single comment I see. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all so much for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you all in that next video.